Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Poppitz, and I'm the membership manager for the California Film Institute. Welcome to the 43rd Mill Valley Film Festival member screening of Playing for Keeps, and this Q&A with the director, Jamie Redford. I'm sad to not be able to see all of our members' smiling faces as the lights come up in the theater, but I can imagine all of your smiling faces at home. I want to start off by thanking the members so much for their support during this time. You've continued to support us through this crazy time. You guys are the very heart and soul of this organization and everything we do, and it's your passion for film that fuels and informs who we are. So thank you. We could not do this without you. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Jamie Redford. How are you doing?
Doing well today. The sun's coming out and it really helps the old psyche.
Yeah.
And lots going on. And like most filmmakers right now, scrambling and, a lot of impromptu work going on in terms of what do you do with your film during this time. It's been very interesting. It's a learning experience. And, but we're also finding some unique opportunities in terms of, we've all been trying to figure out how to communicate more effectively in the digital world in general. One tiny, I wouldn't call it a sliver, but one thing that this COVID pandemic has brought about is it's really forced us to really look long and hard at all the ways in which we can continue to connect people to stories. And I've been very impressed with the flexibility and ingenuity that festivals are embracing in order to continue to serve that purpose to the public. Because, I feel like film festivals in general, I can speak certainly for one. I mean, CFI is a linchpin to the health of this community in Marin County. And I moved here 25 years ago. And it didn't take me very long at all to realize, well, I have a cultural backbone in this city. It got to the point where I realized, well, I almost don't even have to read. All I need to know is what time a movie starts, and I'll go because it's bound to be interesting.
I love that.
And it's bound to have good Q&As and bound to have great filmmakers, and you do multicultural events. And I know for a fact that this community is really proud of CFI. Thank
you. Yeah. I think on behalf of all of the staff and Mark and everyone, I just thank you for that. I think we really miss that relationship in person because, as you say, we want to be here for this community, and it's such an important mission to hold Marin, the culture, arts and culture in Marin, and the Rafael being such a heart of that, and this festival being such a long time hub for art and culture. And so we rely on the great films from people like you. So you're much a part of this interdependent relationship. And we thank you for making great films and making this great film. I loved watching this film right now. It's such a salve for so much of the heaviness of today. Just as you said, so much going on, but this film is just a really lovely reminder that for our own mental health, that we have to play, and we have to keep playing, beyond childhood and into our adult years. So and now with all of us in quarantine, maybe you can talk a little bit about how you've kept playing and how you're introducing play into your quarantine.
Sure. Well, for me on a personal level, speaking personally, I've always, no matter what I'm doing, whether it was a period of time where I was mostly screenwriting, initially for TV and then some film, and then migrated slowly towards documentaries, impact documentaries, environmental and social documentaries, all through the last 20 plus years. There's always been some component of my life that is completely separate from those experiences. And they tend to be things that are engaging in the moment, that are intrinsically rewarding, things that really nobody cares if I do it or not. The point is, it puts a smile on my face, and I come home and it gives me a perspective. It gives me it refreshes me, it renews me. I think, having things, a multifaceted life, particularly as we head into 21st century, and as we are being shoehorned increasingly into specification and our options in terms of how we spend our time. And there's this great irony. Oh, well, you have every option in the world. Well, if you have 2008 different kinds of outlet plugs you can buy, that's a lot of options. But you might waste your entire day looking at outlets to buy, right? That's not really an option. That's noise, and you have to look at your broader life and say, what are the components that I need in my life to have a healthy and whole experience? And what I find is that even though there are a lot of things that come easier in the digital age, a lot of these things are really cutting us off from those things that we intrinsically enjoy for their own sake. Mm. And so play is, as the film covered it, since you watched it, it's internally driven. Mm. And the idea of that internal reward of the pleasure of the moment. You've been hearing this phrase, particularly here in Marin County, be here now, for decades. And there's so many books, but being here now is just another expression of play. Mm. And so for me, it just so happens to be when I was 11, I started playing guitar. Mm. And I never gave it up. I fell in love with it. I play. It rarely does a day go by where I'm not picking up a guitar. I pick it up when I'm sad. I pick it up when I'm happy. I pick it up when I'm frustrated that the family's late and I'm ready to go and they're not. Mm. So I'm waiting to leave. It's there, and it fills me. I lose track of time. It's challenging. It's a very hard thing to do, but not impossible. So there's always that feeling of learning and continuing onward, and the sense that you can continue to grow has always been really satisfying. And it's been like that with sports too. It's been like I tend to gravitate towards individual sports because they are, for me, it allows me to internalize them and inhabit them in my own imagination. And that isn't to say, it's a funny thing because you think of, well, I play football, I play basketball. And certainly those can be play. But some kinds of plays can veer into certain aspects of expectation and competition that in my mind don't quite line up with pure play. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do those things. They're very good for you and they build all kinds of other wonderful qualities. But for me, taking some time every day to do something that is a different aspect of your dreams and desires and your persona. And then when you develop these facets in yourself that are not related to your work, then all that playfulness and that joy, it tends to seep back into the other aspects of your life. And it helps balance out. You can even bring a more playful environment into what might be, very often for all of us, a stressful situation, whether it be personal work or otherwise. So, yeah. And when we made the film, of course, the film was two years in the making. Did we have any idea that what was coming on so many levels? So first shoot was fall of 2017.
Yeah.
And, at that point in time, it was really, to back up a little bit, I need to frame this. As a filmmaker, what I'm driven by is making documentaries that can be used as tools for change. And that be either environmental or social. And that bifurcates into two different entities. The environmental entity is called the Redford Center. And the Redford Center is based in the Presidio in San Francisco. And our purpose there is to identify stories, filmmakers and their stories who are fighting against dirty air and dirty water, climate change, fighting the big challenges to environment of this time. And maybe specifically with an idea that contained in that fight is some hope. It contains some solution. Like, if we have to confront these things, it's one thing to know about them, but what do you actually do about them? And so as a tool, then these films can then go on and be useful for those people that are on the front lines working hard every day to make change, because they can take those films and, like Paul Revere, go into the streets and say, hey, did you know you can do this? Mm. Everybody, it's not all is lost. Mm. And now, alarm bells are critical, and I've made a number of documentaries that are just straight up harrowing. And sometimes that's what you have to do. Sometimes you have to ring that alarm bell and point to egregious misdoings. But for the Redford Center, we make these films. We sponsor young filmmakers who are interested in working in that vein. We fiscally sponsor them. We also have programs for children to help them get versatile with film language and apply the same philosophy towards exploring problems, but exploring solutions as well. Mm-hmm. So film is tools. And then the fun part for me as a filmmaker is, how do you disguise that so it looks like a fun documentary rather than just take your medicine? Mm. And on the other hand, on the social side, I have a company called KPJR Films with Karen Pritzker, my producing partner, which is similar in that we also make films that are meant to be useful for those that are fighting in the front lines to help fix social ills. Because we feel like people on the front lines, they need all the support they can get, particularly when it comes to communication. They're doing such important work on the ground, and it's so easy to get overwhelmed. And if we can provide the right kind of communication and tools that people can take out to the public to advocate for better health in our society, then that's helpful as well. So this is just basically my world. Yeah. So the last couple of films I did with Karen Pritzker were about stress. Mm. And they were about how unmitigated stress with children is bad for their hearts and health, regardless of, regardless of whether or not they grow up seemingly having healthy, normal lives as adults. The biological ramifications of chronic abuse during childhood is remarkable, and people pay over time. Those are hard movies, and we really felt like after those films, we had to talk about, maybe it's time. You think, what's needed right now? Like, what are we asking for with so much chaos and so much despair? Do we need something that tilts a little bit more towards inspiration? Mm. Do we need to make people feel good? Do we need to come at this a little bit with lead by example of people who have, fairly daunting jobs that have managed to strike a balance in their life? Mm-hmm. So what you see in Playing for Keeps, and what you saw, the series of characters that are, like a lot of us, pounding the pavement, working hard, at risk of overload, and countering that with a playful attitude and behaviors that are really good for them, not only psychically, but physically.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, you covered so much of what I was actually going to ask about. I mean, your background is pretty incredible in the work that you've done with the Redford Center and the films that you've made from the subjects you mentioned, climate change and child abuse and dyslexia. And I mean, really hard hitting documentary film. I mean, just say a little bit like why you felt that play was such an important subject to address. And like, again, as you said, in the modern world, why are we playing less, and why do you feel like it's important to talk about?
Well, we're quickly becoming an indoor species, and the ramifications of that on our health. I've always felt that when you look at a problem, if you're advocating, and that's the thing, is like it's a fun, working an advocate is hard, because traditionally speaking, you have to be careful with advocacy, because you run into a problem of credibility, which I understand, because the knee-jerk reaction, or the understandable reaction, really is, what's this guy selling me? Mm. So if you're going to advocate, then you really have to have a case. And being one that actually believes in science, I find science a really, really powerful linchpin from which you can sort of build a story about why something is real and important. And, all the research shows that, as our play decreases, our level of cortisol goes up, our high blood pressure goes up, suppressed immune systems are put down, higher rates of depression, higher rates of suicide. Even in populations, here you might find this interesting, even in populations that, say for instance, you have a population which is otherwise very healthy population. They don't smoke, they don't drink alcohol, they don't overeat, there's not a lot of unsafe sex. In other words, not a lot of destructive behaviors, not a lot of self-destructive choices being made that harm your health. Imagine healthy people like that. However, introduce a childhood in which a child is chronically exposed to physical, mental, sexual abuse in the home, instability in the home, a parent incarcerated, all of these things. And just that in and of itself creates remarkable physical damage that lasts a lifetime. And so really, I mean, the parallels between what play can do and some of the solutions around, say, toxic stress are loving, caring relationships with adults, and a sense of self-empowerment, and a sense of self-worth, and literally, in the case of play, a physical means in which you help your body expel and connect with something that is pleasurable, that is not destructive. It actually has a very powerful effect. And it doesn't take, you don't have to, you don't have to go to Kilimanjaro in order to benefit. There are the smallest things we do. It can even be reading a book, or walking a dog, or even being still, knitting. It's really a matter of slowing down and asking yourself, what is it that you love? And I think a lot of times we just don't take a moment to ask ourselves, what do we actually really love to do with our time? And make room for that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. We're not really taught to do that very often, are we?
No, we're rewarded to work.
Yeah. Actually, the character, the subject rather, is, I think her name was Isabella. She worked in arts nonprofit actually, and fun fact, she used to be a CFI programming intern, so there's a nice little connection there. But her words really rang true for me. I think she just reminded me a lot of myself, actually, because we have a similar role, and just my job can be quite all consuming. So I just really related to her character, or who she is rather. But how did, maybe say a little bit about how you found the subjects and that are featured in the film?
Sure. Well, that's always, there's always a little bit of, there's always a little happenstance, a little luck, a little intuition. About 12 years ago, I was writing a screenplay, and it had a section in it about swing dance. And I remember walking into the Great American Music Hall and just be blown away by the feeling in that room of such unbridled joy and such lack of self-consciousness and generosity. And everybody was smiling. It was so infectious. I thought, God, it's a beautiful thing. And so when I thought about, and meanwhile you walk out the door and it's a rainy night in San Francisco. No one knows what's going on upstairs. It's just people tapping into joy, and that carries over into their lives. And it's just proven time and again that people that tap into joy, it emanates. It doesn't. It's not like, I'm gonna have fun. Oh, I always look fun. Now I'm gonna be mad again. No, it spreads. It's not self-contained that way. So the people, the people in the room and the way they talk to each other and the way they say goodnight to each other at the end of the evening and the flushed cheeks and it stuck with me. So that was just always in the back of my mind as a potential candidate. I also, I thought about New York City, having grown up there, and what a challenge that would be. And this idea that you do have to make an effort. I mean, as she said, you have to you can't just, if I had a dime for everybody that said, I really ought to play more. So, but it's hard to actually do it. And as the oncologist nurse says, some days she just comes home and she's not really feeling it. And, I got to get dressed. I got to drive down to the beach. But she never regrets it. She just, once she's down there, she never regrets it. So there is a kind of commitment, but the more you commit to it, the less difficult it is. Lester Holt's an interesting case, the newscaster.
Yeah.
I was on a...
Together? How did you find? I had no idea he was in a band. That's so great.
Yeah, I was on a Delta connection flight to like Alexandria or something like that. And they had one of, those little magazines that come in the back seat of the plane. And they had a caricature of Lester drawn in it. And he was playing a bass. And I thought, what? And I read about it and I realized he'd been playing a bass in a band in Midtown Manhattan. And I just thought, well, talk about, and as he says, he loves what he does, but talk about stressful jobs. Hanging out of helicopters, being hated by half America, having to have security 24/7, fast-paced, hard-pressed. You can make journalists, people don't understand how much is on the line and how much can go awry if you don't get your stories right. The pressure is just immense. And particularly in these divisive times, for someone like Lester, but he gets down in that club, and he considers it, it's sort of his mental health day. He really needs to have, as he says, I love what I do, but I don't want that just to define me. I am more than that.
Yeah.
There's in the movie, there's a really interesting painting you may have noticed by Peter Bruegel, the Dutch painter. And in the painting, it's from like the maybe 16th century. It's painted at the village square. And in the painting, if you recall, it's just everybody in the courtyard is having fun.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
They're either gossiping, chasing each other, laughing, sharing a drink, yanking pigtails, playing with wheels, chasing dogs, you name it. And think about the mind of Peter Bruegel. What was he saying about that community? And how people spent their time. And I think we've all been in situations. I know I was in Colombia 3 years ago on a Thursday night in a courtyard, and it had that same distinct feeling of people just out and about having fun, just enjoying each other, dancing, kicking back, sharing time, laughing. You juxtapose that image with the Monterey Mall, where the entire environment is transactional.
Yeah.
And I'd say 80% of the people are looking at their phones. And you don't really need to think too hard about that to look at that and see which one is actually feeding one's soul versus not. So.
Yeah. I'm curious, has this always been kind of a part of your life? Have you always been, like, I guess, a player, for lack of a better word, or did your relationship to play change a lot in the making of this film?
No, I would say I've always been a player and accident prone. There isn't a sport I don't like and a sport I haven't hurt myself doing. No, my family, my dad's a big player too.
I was going to ask about that. Is the Sundance Kid a player at heart as well?
Yeah. We tend to be very active. I mean, give us a chance to do something and try something new, and kind of unafraid to give it a go. And
I'm curious, and too, you have kids, yes?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, how has that affected your parenting? I mean, I'm assuming they're kind of grown now, but when they were younger, how did the aspect of play inform your parenting choices?
Well, actually, play was actually very important. I mean, you mentioned a film I made called The Big Picture, I think.
Yeah.
And that was about dyslexia, and about what is dyslexia and what it is not. And it was really a movie that Karen Pritzker and I made. It was our first movie together. And it was really meant to act as a salve on the wounds for families who are small children who literally can't read yet. And at that age, when it's all about the mechanics, it's harrowing. It can be very hard to imagine how your child is ever going to be reasonably educated at that point in time. Well, it turns out, without going off on a tangent, there are a lot of methodologies involved that can and will help and do help. But there's also other things as well that are not just specific learning techniques. There's also sort of the need to have a wrap around for dyslexic kids, to give them sort of a wrap around lifestyle in which the problem of mechanics of reading and writing is not their sole focus in life, that it doesn't become something that consumes them to the point where that's all they're thinking about. And that's all they're, if you go to school and struggle all day long, and then you come home and you struggle with a tutor, and then you struggle with a therapist, and you struggle. It's hard to have your self-esteem, because you're just being pounded with this idea that something is not right, something's lacking. And my wife, who is a just absolutely stellar teacher, put together a whole plan around this. And part of it was understanding that we need to identify things for my son Dylan that where his strengths were, and make sure that we focused on his strengths as well, and made sure that there were parts of his life where he felt very confident. So helping him find lots of ways to play, and making sure that, yes, he had to work harder at times. Yes, some of these exercises were sore, and there were bound to be times of frustration or even embarrassment. But, he became an excellent athlete, an individual athlete. He became a wonderful surfer, He rode for the Drake High School mountain bike team as a top rider. We made sure that he had other things that gave him self-esteem. And so I think, play in that regard is a really important aspect of sort of, particularly kids who are learning challenged, a way to shore up and create that sort of holistic life experience that we all need to have, right?
Yeah.
So.
It's so great. I mean, I know for me, since I've watched this film, I've actually called myself out a couple times, be like, I need to play. I need to have a moment. And like you say, just being present can be enough, can be playful. And so that's because I watched your film. So thank you so much for that.
Yes, thank you for showing it. It's an honor.
Yeah. And I just ask if what you're working on now, if there's anything you want to mention that's in the works.
Yes. I am working on a biopic, my first one. Unfortunately, I can't tell you what it's about. I'm sorry, but it will air in May of 2021.
We'll keep an eye out.
And it's my first biography, and I'm in love. I'm just having the best time.
Can't wait
to the best time.
Out.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again so much. I think we're about at that time.
Okay.
If you have any more films, we'll keep showing them. So
you've been very supportive to me over the years. I thank you.
Yeah. All right. Well, and thank you again to all of our members for all of their support, and enjoy all of the other movies that we have this week.
Take care.